just from me, I'm Melissa. I'm a business advisor for Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Growth Hub. So for those of you that aren't aware of the Growth Hub or aren't familiar with it, we were set up by Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. So the aim of what we do is to help businesses grow. We've got a range of specialist advisors as well as general advisors, so to speak. So I'm a general advisor. And then today we've got my colleague Joe Gill. He is a specialist HR advisor. And then we've also got marketing advisor and a high growth and recovery advisor. So if that's of any use to you, please feel free to call the business helpline number or contact myself after the session, and we can arrange a little chat just with more of how we can help your business. So on to the series. So today it's the health and wellbeing support series. Obviously, given the period of time that we're in right now, we felt it was really important to put something on for Staffordshire businesses to help, just to help you through this difficult time. So today we've got Katrina Hudson from Heroes and Stardust, who is kindly going to present this webinar that's all about the what now what post-pandemic. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to you, Katrina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me just start by sharing my screen, if I can do that. Just bear with me a moment while I just get technical for a second, which is not my strong point. Can everybody see that? Are you okay with that, Melissa? Can you see my screen? Perfect, lovely. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me today for my seminar, which is called What Now? Now what? And I love that Melissa was saying earlier that Katrina is going to help us work through this pandemic, and it's said as though like I've been through so many pandemics in my life and I know exactly what to do with that. You know, this is new for me too, but I do have some things that I think I want to share with you that I think might be useful for you to just know. And I guess as part of this series from the Growth Hub, looking at sort of mental health and raising mental health awareness, I think maybe understanding the causes of some of that might be helpful, and that it's okay to not be okay, which had a little issue there.
Well, okay, if you just start sharing your screen again, Katrina, thank you.
Okay, not sure what happened there. Yeah, so I'm interested, as well as understanding the causes and why we're feeling the way we're feeling and why that might be, is also looking at, and so what? You know, so what can we do about it? What steps can you take to perhaps that'll be positive for you, that will help you be wherever it is that you need to be next. So I guess, why am I in a position to talk to you about this? Well, my background is fairly varied. I started out as an actress and a singer, and as an actress and singer I was a great waitress. But I guess that as an actor and a singer, one of the things I had to get really good at was understanding the characters that I was going to play and really getting under the skin of that character. So I guess throughout my career, I've been really interested in people, understanding how they tick, how to get the best out of them, what motivates them to do the things that they do. So I've always had an interest in people. Over the last, dare I say, 30 years, makes me feel very old, I've held several roles and several senior leadership roles over that time, sort of executive director level. And again, always in the business of people. And my background, my business background, is in organisational development, so change, of which this is probably one of the biggest changes globally that we've faced. So yeah, I've been around change a lot and helping people work their way through change effectively. I'm an NLP practitioner, I'm a professional coach, and I'm also very lucky in that I'm a motivational speaker, a professional speaker, working for a gentleman called Paul McGee, who's known as the Sumo Guy, and I get to travel all around the country and all around Europe delivering some motivational messages, which are primarily around resilience, getting the best out of yourself, etc. So I feel I'm in a fairly good position to be able to at least give you my view today and share what I know, in a hope that, you know, you'll get something out of it. There might be a few nuggets in there that may help you, I hope, along the way. So what this webinar aims to cover is 4 things, but the crux of it is the 4th element of it really, which is about what are you going to do? You know, now that we know what we know, so what are you going to do about it? And I'll probably talk at greater length on point 4 than the other points. But also I think we need to maybe just stop and breathe for a minute and recognize where we are right now. You know, and recognize that it's tough. You know, it's been a bit weird and a bit tough, and that whatever you're experiencing, it's completely normal for you. You know, you're just being human. You're not being weird. You're not being weak. You're not being strange in any way. You're just being human, and I think there's some comfort in that. Really, I think there's also some merit in doing a very quick run through on how this thing between our ears works, the brain, because ultimately that's what's in control here. And if we can understand how that's made up and how it can work for us and against us, that might help you to make some choices and decisions about how you want to think and what thinking you want to take notice of and what thinking you don't want to take notice of, because don't believe everything you think, right? If I believed everything I thought, I probably wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. So there's some thoughts up there that are really useful, and there's some thoughts up there that maybe just aren't as useful. So understanding why that is and how that works could be helpful. And the third thing to recognize is that, you know, this is weird. This time we're in now is weird. It's not like anything you'll have experienced before. And if you're thinking, well, this is unusual, well, because it is unusual. You know, it is seismic. And the planets have kind of aligned for sheer panic. So let's just recognize some of that and how to deal with it, which takes me to my 4th point. Okay, well, all those things in mind, flipping it, what on earth am I going to do then? What can I do that's going to actually help change my circumstances, help change the environment, help change where I am today, to be in a place that's, you know, whatever that place needs to be, whatever that needs to be for you. So where the heck are we? Well, thinking about since March, since the sort of the first lockdown of COVID, I think as a country, as a world, we've been in a pretty strange place. Our brains have had a lot to deal with, and normally we have a lot on our plates anyway, don't we, really? We've got quite a lot to think about and we're juggling quite a lot of stuff, but certainly since 2020, the start of 2020, the bandwidth required to hold all this information has got exponentially larger, and I think sometimes we're struggling with it. So in addition to our normal daily thoughts, we're also thinking about, you know, are we going to be healthy? What's going to happen to my business? What's going to happen to my staff? Blah, blah, blah. And we are just holding so much stuff in our brains. We are remembering stuff that's frightening. We are in stuff that feels frightening. We're imagining stuff that feels frightening. And we are just overloading this brain with all this kind of fear thinking. And the reason on the diagram, I've also got a lovely picture of my 2 dogs. There's a Highland, I don't own a Highland cow, I just like them. But the reason I've got pictures of my dogs and a Highland cow on there is because whilst I'm sitting on the hill with all this kind of thinking just whizzing around in my brain, you know, my dogs are just thinking about chasing a ball, and the cows are just thinking about eating their grass. And it just makes me realise that in the grand scheme of things, my pets are probably happier than I am. So that's a depressing thought, I suppose. Or maybe I should just be more dog-like. So why is it that my lovely dogs, Coco and Bowie, are happier than I am? Well, it's because of the way that our brains work. And so what I'm going to do now is very quickly take you through a couple of minutes, PhD level, clearly, of how your brain works. Because I think it's really important to just understand the mechanics of it, because then we can kind of go, oh, right, that's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. Oh, that makes sense now. Oh, maybe I can do something about that. So you've got to remember that your brain is hugely complex and very busy. you know, it is very busy. So it's got loads to do, you know, it's got to pump your heart, it's got to give you new blood every 30 days, it's got to make you breathe, it's got to wet your eyes, it's got to do whatever it is your spleen does. You know, it's really, really busy. And only one part of its functionality is thinking. So your brain is always going to try and conserve energy. And the way it does that is create habits and thinking patterns that it can just do automatically. So it is not having to spend great amounts of energy thinking and using energy to come up with concepts and ideas. So just bear that thought in mind. So there's 3 parts to the thinking brain, bearing in mind thinking is only a small part of what it's doing. It's currently wetting my eyes at the moment and helping me to breathe and all kinds of things. So the 3 parts of the thinking brain, and forgive me, you may know some of this, but I think it's just useful to remind ourselves. The first part is that reptilian brain, which kind of looks like a fist. It's the pink one at the bottom, and it looks a bit like a fist. And that's called your primitive or your reptilian, sometimes known as your monkey brain. And this is the oldest kid on the block, if you like. This is the one that's been around. This is the one we've had since we slopped onto the earth many moons ago. This is the brain we had. And this is the brain our dogs have. And the point of this brain is to just keep you alive. That's it. In fact, the point of your brain, actually, is to keep you alive. That's it. It's not your brain's job to make you happy. It just keeps you alive. And the primitive brain is wired to look for what's wrong. It's wired to look for threat. It's wired to look for danger. Because in the days when we slopped onto the planet, if we didn't have that wiring, it was the difference between having lunch or being lunch. So we have to have that ability to scan our horizons and look for what's wrong and look for threat and danger, because then we can fight, flight, freeze, or submit. And that's what keeps us alive. But to do those things, we have to expend our energy in a certain way. So our reptilian brain will take all the oxygen that is required and put it into our heart and our lungs and our muscles to help us to run away. And it will fill us with adrenaline and cortisol so we can fight, flight, or freeze. That's what it does. And if we're able to spend that energy and we're able to fight something, or we're able to hide, or we're able to, then that adrenaline and that cortisol gets spent and we return to our original state. Nowadays, the threats that we have are not physical fighting threats, which means that adrenaline and cortisol, unless it is spent, can kind of still flush around our bodies. The second part of the brain is the limbic brain, or the emotional brain, and that's to do with feelings, relationships, bonding, language, so we're able to name things. It's about community, it's about building a sense of belonging. So at the moment during lockdown, those feelings of isolation are really starting to affect that part of our brain, because we need to nurture, we need to feel loved, we need to feel part of a community. And then the final piece of the brain, which is the bit that my lovely dogs Bowie and Coco don't have, is the rational or computer brain. And this is what makes humans just so extraordinary, because this is the part of the brain that allows us to have logic, allows us to think in concepts and patterns and imagination and look for reason. And this is why we're able to build bridges, why we're able to be medical geniuses, why we're able to create cars and all kinds of wonderful stuff, because we have this logical planning computer brain. But this logical planning computer brain can also allow us to have memory and recall and imagination, which is great when we're wanting to build bridges or we're wanting to create and do something wonderful. But in a time when we're experiencing fear or threat, we can remember fear, we can experience fear, and we can imagine fear. And whether it is real or perceived, the moment we experience any kind of danger or fear, the reptilian brain takes over and it shuts the other brain down. And then you're in fight, flight, or freeze. At that point, the reptilian brain takes the oxygen away from the neocortex. Because in the good old bad old days, if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you didn't need a neocortex to have a rational debate with that tiger. You just needed to run. So the oxygen is removed from that logical part of your brain, which is why during threat, you will hear people say things like, "It was red mist. I just couldn't think straight." Well, of course you couldn't. There was no oxygen in your neocortex. No wonder you weren't thinking straight. No wonder you were just panicking and wanting to escape. In addition to taking the oxygen away from your brain, it also takes the oxygen away from your sexual organs, because no one needs nookie when they're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and also from your digestive system, because no one needs to eat a sandwich when you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. It then fills you with adrenaline and cortisol and gets you ready to fight. Great if it's a saber-toothed tiger. Move forward several millennia and the threats are different. And the threats during this pandemic, you know, they're sizable, but they're not physical fight threats. They're mental threats. They're, you know, how am I going to pay the mortgage? What's going to happen to my business? What's going to happen to my staff? What might happen to my health? These are mental problems that you can't physically fight. And the risk is we fill up with adrenaline and cortisol, we go into primitive fight or flight thinking, and you understand why we suddenly start to have a mental health epidemic. In addition to this, we're also going through a bit of a seismic change. And some of you may be familiar with the Kubler-Ross change curve. And I did a webinar back in March all about this, which I think you can probably get a link to as well, where I spookily predicted the future. But the reason I bring this curve up is because I think it's really useful for you to recognise that in addition to all this kind of fight or flight thinking that might be going on, you're also part of a process. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a psychologist and wrote a book many years ago called Of Death and Dying. Sounds cheery. But her work was to work with people who were facing terminal illness and the families of those people facing terminal illness. And what she found was that when people were facing their mortality, they would tend to go through a series of experiences and processes, a curve, as would the people around them. They would also go through the same cycle. So it starts with shock and denial. Can't believe you've just told me I've got 6 months to live. No, this can't possibly be right. I'm not going to believe it. And therefore my energy is still quite high because I'm in denial. And then we'll move into anger. This isn't fair. Why me? I'm only 43 or whatever. And then down into the depression when you think, oh my goodness, this is really happening. And there's, you know, what can I do? There's nothing I can do, or I feel desperate. And then after that, there's an acceptance. All right, this is what's going to happen. Now what? And then you go into integration, or the new normal, which is a phrase I can't stand. But anyway, you move into the new normal. And if we think about this change curve and we look at the pandemic since March, you can see how, as a nation, we've been going through this curve. So not only have you been going through it yourself, but you've been going through it as part of a nation. And I think at the moment, we're kind of rocking between anger and depression. I think when we were doing Eat Out to Dine Out a month ago, we were in acceptance and looking at new ways of being and thinking, oh, we're probably getting through this now. I can work from home. I can hack it. It's been tough, but, you know, I'm having my steak and chips on the lawn now. I'm all right. And then they've said, we're back to where we were in March, and people have gone flying back around to anger and depression again. So you can see that as a nation, you know, this is where we're at. And I guess the media has created a perfect storm for us, really, because they've given us a 24/7 running commentary to panic by. You know, so back in March, I think the message was roughly stay at home, wash your hands, 2 meters space. And I'm not aware that that message has fundamentally changed. And yet we've had 6 and 7 months of 24/7 barrage of awfulness. And that is just seeking to charge up our looking for fear and our engaging that primitive brain. This is not healthy stuff. And whilst I'm not underplaying the enormity of the situation, and of course you've got to be informed, and of course you've got to do the right stuff, you know, just manage your mental diet. Just think about what you're feeding your brain. Because that 24/7 media coverage, and I don't know about you, but I'm almost sick of talking about it. You know, can't go to the hairdressers now without spending an hour and a half talking about COVID. And I just think it just doesn't help to keep feeding ourselves that panic. And the thing about the change curve as well is it's not linear. You know, it'd be great, wouldn't it, if we just started at one end and woofed our way through to out the other side, but it actually doesn't work like that. And we've seen it in the last 6 months. We've been bouncing back and forth. And my experience has probably been more like the diagram on the right, where I've just gone all over the place. And recently, actually, I did have a bereavement, and I think emotional outburst was my position of choice for quite a while on that. So no, it's not linear, and you know, you are where you are, and it's not right or wrong, and it doesn't make you good or bad. It's just that's where you are, and if that's where you are, then just recognize that and just sit with that and go, okay, well, that's where I am. Where do I need to get to? You know, am I where I should be, or actually is sitting here in anger and depression having an impact on me and preventing me from actually making some wise choices and some wise moves because I'm just gripped in anger? But wherever you are, you know, that's where you are. Just recognize it, and knowing that, I think, can be hugely powerful and empowering, because it's okay to not be okay. It's rubbish, isn't it? At the moment, it can be a really difficult time. So, what is the conclusion of all that then? Well, there was a fella many years ago came up with this acronym of E+R=O, and it was created by a man called Jack Canfield, who wrote the lovely books, you know, The Chicken Soup for the Soul. He wrote all those books, and he came up with this, which is E+R=O. And this is kind of my equation for life, and I stand by this equation all the time, not just during a pandemic. In life, there are events. How I respond to that event will determine my outcome. And what I love about this is he has chosen the word response. And a response requires a logical thinking brain. If he'd put react, then we'd be in primitive brain. But he's not put react, he's put respond. And the reason he's put respond is because he wants you to be in a position to achieve your outcome. And you can only remain focused on your outcome and achieve your outcome if you're in thinking brain and choosing your response to situations, because you're not responsible for what happens to you. You're not responsible for being in the middle of the pandemic. That's not your fault. You're not responsible for that. But you are responsible for how you choose to respond to it. And understanding how the brain works in the first place is a really good way, a really good starting point. But also I'd say to you, what is your outcome? You know, and that's a question I would pose to you today. And, you know, think about that either now or later. You know, be very specific. What is it you need to achieve? What is it? What is the goal? And that could be a great big hairy audacious goal, or perhaps even a smaller goal, which are sometimes the better ones to have because they're achievable. But if you're in a situation now where perhaps business is really difficult, you know, you're an SME, and you know you've been through furlough, or you're coming out the other side of furlough and thinking, now what? What would be a good outcome for you right now? What would be a good outcome for you in terms of your mental health? What would be a good outcome for you in terms of your business or your family or your health? What would that be? And then once you're really, really clear on that outcome, the events will take care of themselves. You know, the pandemic will still be going on. But if I want to achieve outcome X in that context, how do I need to think? How do I need to respond in order to make sure I still get that? Because if I'm in primitive panic brain, this outcome just goes out the window because I'm not thinking straight anymore. Sounds easy, and it is probably easier said than done. So the crux of it then, what is it you need to do? If I understand that maybe my thinking is not great, and I'm maybe in primitive thinking because I've been watching too much media, or I've been dining out on threat for the last 6 months and wondering why I feel a bit fight or flighty, and why I've got a knot in the center of my chest. What is it you need to do? And when I thought about this, when I was speaking to Melissa a few months ago, I thought, well, you know, I think the first thing is to raise your self-awareness. And it sounds so obvious, really, but if I know what's going on, if I know what's going on inside of me in terms of how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, then I'm much more likely to be able to have some kind of control over that. So understanding how I think and how I feel is the first step. And that's not to necessarily judge it or change it. It might just be to just sit with it and see it for what it is. Because if I can get the right kind of thinking and the right kind of feeling, I'm much more likely to get the right kind of action, and I'm much more likely to be in a responsive situation where I can achieve my outcome. The other thing I think that would be really useful and has certainly helped me over the last 6 months is starting to appreciate your strengths and work from a place of your passions. Look at who's around you, what's around you, and everything that's at your disposal. So, for example, when COVID lockdown first hit, as a self-employed person, I had a diary full of events just stacked up for the next sort of month or so, and it was looking really good. And literally overnight, those engagements left my diary. They were cancelled or postponed, and my diary literally emptied. And it was really easy at first for me to go into that panic and to think about, oh, this is all my fault. Oh, well, aren't I stupid? Why has this happened to me? It's not fair. Panic, panic, panic. And I also spent time being really busy, but useless busy, just busy justifying my busyness. And then it was only when I really started to calm down and kind of practice what I preached. And I thought, look, Katrina, just go back to basics here. You know you're in kind of fight or flight thinking. This is not going to help you. So let's go back to remembering what your strengths are, what is reasonable for you to achieve at the moment, and how can you use your strengths and your connections and your support to achieve that. And that's what I did. And it wasn't perfect, and sometimes it was clunky, but at least I was moving in the right direction. And I felt that I had some control in an out of control situation, which for me was the difference that made the difference and stopped me panicking. I also engaged in a lot more physical fitness activity at that time, which, even though I hate it with a passion, I recognized I needed to get rid of some of this nervous energy and spend it. And that certainly also helped. So the other thing I would say in terms of your self-awareness is to start to ask yourself better questions. Start to look for answers and look for possibilities. So questions like, who could help me with this? When have I faced a problem before and overcome it? What did I do? What are my strengths? These are really useful questions that will engage that logical neocortex brain. But of course, we have pre-wired questions in our lovely brain, and these are pre-wired questions that help that reptilian brain keep us alive. These are our pre-wired survival questions. And I've pulled these from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a therapist, but I do think some of these questions and being aware of some of these questions, sometimes called faulty thinking traits, but I don't know that they're faulty, I just think they're survival traits, and I just think we're wired for them. So rather than call them bad, just see them for what they are and that they exist. And particularly when we're in the grip or we're feeling threatened, these are some of our drugs of choice, some of our questions of choice to get that lovely adrenaline and cortisol racing through our bodies. Great if you need to run from a fire, but unless you're running from a fire or a saber-toothed tiger, these are not going to help. These are going to keep that reptilian brain nicely fed. And the reason I show them to you is not so that you'll get really good at them. I suspect we all can do them already. It's just so that you recognize them. So that when they pop into your head, you just see them for what they are. You know, no judgment, no trying to change it, no trying to fight it. There's no point trying to fight it. But just recognize it and go, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what this is. So the first one up here is the all or nothing thinking. That black or white, you know, because it's gone wrong once, it's always going to go wrong. You know, I didn't get the contract, I'll never get a contract. You know, I didn't get the job, I'll never get the job. That all or nothing thinking. And with all of these pieces of thinking, there's no evidence often, nearly always, to support any of this. But we're not in logical brain to look for evidence, are we? We're in reptilian brain, so we're just trying to get the hell out of the situation. So all these thinkings are just going to make you fight, flight, or freeze. They're going to keep you alive. So the second one is jumping to conclusions. You know, the reason something happened was because, without any facts whatsoever. So I didn't get the job, it's because the interviewer didn't like me. Well, where's your evidence for that? You know, it's just jumping to conclusions. Labeling, yeah. I must be stupid. Well, I didn't get the work, so I'm stupid. Or my business isn't surviving as well as Tommy's down the road. It's because I'm rubbish. You know, this labeling that we give ourselves. And again, it's just it's your brain saying, get out of the situation, run. Disqualifying the positives, you know, people giving you compliments. Well, you're really good at this, and have you tried that? And you could be amazing at this. Oh, well, you would say that, you're just being nice. No, it couldn't possibly be true that I'm brilliant, could it? Far better to realise, to think that I'm rubbish, because then I'll run away and I'll live another day. Better to be wrong and alive than right and dead. My personal favourite, my drug of choice, is the should list. How many of you have a should list? Oh, I should have done this. I'm in this situation because I should have done that, and I must do this, and I should have, and if only I'd have done that, and I should have done this. And the thing about a should and a must list is it comes with a healthy side order of guilt, which, you know, is always great on a Wednesday or a Tuesday morning. You know, I should change the should to can, would be my advice. I can do this. I can do that. It's much more positive than, oh, I should do this, you know. And especially, I'm a professional, you know, I should have seen this coming. I should have been ready for a pandemic. I should have seen this coming. Really? Well, you know, in the event of unless you've got a time machine and a TARDIS, I'm not really sure why that would have been the case, but there you go. Overgeneralizing, you know, always, never, everybody, nobody, these kind of words kind of crop into your thinking. You know, nothing good ever happens to me. It's always like this. Catastrophizing, you know, making things massive when they're really not. You know, making it feel like it's a seismic 10 when it's perhaps only a 2 or a 3. Or minimizing the possible, minimizing the potential at the same time. So again, it's the brain saying, get out of there, run, fight, hide. And then there's a mental filter where you just lovely focus on the negative and dismiss the positive. Why? Because we're wired that way. Why? Because we're trying to stay alive. But just because you're not seeing the positive stuff does not mean it is not there. And what you give energy to grows. So if I'm going to constantly look for rubbish and look for crapness and look for evidence that I'm rubbish, I'm going to find it. I'll find it by the bucket load, for sure. But likewise, if I look for positivity and I look for things that are positive and optimistic and have strength to them and that I can do and that are beautiful and wonderful, you know what? I'll find those too, because they're all out there all the time. It's how we're wiring our thinking and what we want to look for and what we want to covet. Emotional reasoning. Now, this is a really interesting one because sometimes the thinking is so quick, you don't even know you've done it. The only reason you'd be aware of it is when the feelings kick in. And so you'll go off how you're feeling, and how you're feeling will be the answer. So if I feel rubbish and if I feel sad and if I feel angry, it's because it's rubbish and sad and angry. And it's not necessarily the case. So the reason you're feeling something is probably because you've thought one of these traits. So just catch that. And just because you're feeling it doesn't make it true. And then the last one, you know, just for giggles really, is personalization. You know, it's all my fault. So if you want to know why COVID-19 is in the world, that would be down to me. So just catch that thinking, not fighting it, just catch it and think, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing. I see where's my evidence for that thought? And as soon as you start thinking about where's my evidence, you're into the logical brain because you're taking your time to think about the thinking. So what does this mean? Well, it's about self-awareness. It's about the ability to recognize and understand your thoughts, your moods, your emotions, and your behaviors. And if you can understand them, then you can choose whether or not to let them out into the world or not, and whether that's going to be useful. So you can start to manage that those moods and redirect any impulses or moods that aren't going to be useful. You're able to suspend judgment, and that is so important. Just suspend the judgment. Think before you act. Respond to the event in order to get your outcome. And it starts with the good stuff. It starts with you. You're the good stuff. You're it. You really are. And the power of resource that we have within us, if only we know how to mine for it, and if only we can tap into it, because it is there. You've been hugely successful. You've got this far. Well done. You know, you didn't do that by luck. You've done that through strength, through talent, through knowledge, through all kinds of stuff. It's there. You need to tap into it. At the moment, if you're in reptilian brain, you're just not tapping into the resource pool. You're just running. You're just panicking. And the media, unfortunately, really loves that and will encourage you to do it. So start with the good stuff. You know, what are your strengths? Can you even remember what your strengths are? And how recently did you use them? You know, let's not try and work from a place of weakness that's not our comfort zone or not our best of our abilities. Let's look at what we're really good at. When we're at our best and we're in flow, which strengths do we work on? Which strengths are we tapping into? Because you know what? They're the ones that you need to tap into now. They're the ones that are going to take you further. What are your preferences? How do you want to work? What's the environment and the conditions that help you to work at your best? And there'll be some of those things that you have no control over at the moment, and it'll be rubbish. But there will be still elements that you can. There will be still elements when you can work at your best, even if that means to take yourself away for half an hour and go and have a walk in the fresh air and then come back to it. Whatever it is, what are your preferences? How do you work at your best? How can you start to bring some of that stuff in? For me personally, it's things like what I can see and what I can smell. Weirdly, smell is really important to me. So when I'm working in my office, I have all kinds of different smells and aromas that will invoke some kind of thought and feeling. Anything that will help. How do I learn at my best? What is the best way for me to be receptive and open and learning and looking for opportunities? And most important of all, what is that outcome? What is that goal that you need right now? Not you know, a life goal. What is the goal we need right now for the next month, for the next 2 months, to get us through to Christmas, to get us through to, what are those goals? You know, because hope is not a strategy. You can't just hope it's going to get better. You got to get a plan. You got to start thinking about what is reasonable for me to do. How can I help myself? There are loads of questionnaires and inventories and stuff available online for you to help raise your awareness about your strengths. I've put some up there just as a start of the 10, but I'm sure you know many more than that. I've put a lovely free one on there though. I love a freebie. So if you go onto the viacharacter.org, there's a lovely strengths inventory on there which gives you your top 20 strengths. And my advice then would be, looking at your goal, looking at your outcome, and then look at your top 5 strengths. How could you dial those up more and use those strengths to help you with that outcome? And even just knowing that stuff and even just thinking about that stuff means you're out of reptilian brain. Even if that's all it does is keep you in that neocortex, then it's time well spent. Ask yourself better questions. Structure better conversations. In front of you is the GROW model, which is a model that is used traditionally in coaching. And I mentioned earlier, I'm a professional coach, and this is the model that I use. And this is to help you have a conversation with a purpose, a conversation with an outcome, a conversation that results in action, that moves you forward to whatever it is you want to achieve in terms of that goal. So structure your thoughts, structure your conversations using a GROW model. And if you've got somebody who can work with you on that, you know, a pal, a coach, a peer, you know, a decent human being who can structure the conversation around GROW, all the better. And you're asking yourself questions. And the purpose of that is to mine deeper and deeper and deeper to see if you can come up with some options. So the outcome, the goal, what is it that you want to achieve in the next month? Well, I want to achieve X. I want to feel, I don't know, I want to feel more positive. Okay. So how would you know you were feeling more positive? Well, I'd be doing this, I'd be doing that, I'd be doing the next thing. Okay, so what's going on at the moment? What's the reality? What's currently getting in your way? What's currently going on? Well, it's been really difficult because of blah, blah, blah. Okay. So going into options, what could you do? How have you faced this kind of thing before? And if you have, what sort of things did you do in the past that worked well? Who could help you with this? What would be a reasonable first step? These kind of questions. And then once you kind of come up with some options, so what are you going to do? And when are you going to do it by? And how likely are you to do it? And how will you know you've done it? And how am I going to check in? These are much better ways of structuring your thinking and structuring your conversations so that you start to move. Because I think when we're in the grip of panic, we can ask questions, but they're questions that just keep us rooted in fear and keep us stuck. By asking open what, when, how questions, we can start to actually move out of the mire and into a more resourceful position. I've shared on the screen, and I'm sure this slide set will be available for you later, so either take a photo or record it later. There are loads of great questions you can ask yourself that will help you to move to be responsive and to move towards your goal and outcome. But I specifically chose these ones because these are all appreciative questions. And it's working on the theory that, we were already wired to look for negative. So I'm trying to flip the thinking to look for appreciative and optimistic and forward thinking solutions. And also because what you give focus to and energy to grows, well, better to work from a place of strength and appreciation of what I already have and what I could have than just thinking about what's crap and what's rubbish. So there are questions under the different headings here for appreciating others, seeing the world differently, etc., etc. So I don't know, if you took a self-awareness question, so if you're trying to have a goal around improving your mental health this month, you might say, so what is it you love doing? You know, and how do you feel when you're doing the things that you love? And then appreciating others. Well, if you know what it is that you love and who brings out the best in you and who inspires you, who could you have around who inspires you? And how might this moment seem different if I made some change? Or what could you say yes to this month? Or what could you say no to this month? What are you most willing to do? What is it like when you're at your best? What 3 words positively describe you? And what are you grateful for? What could be different in a month's time? These are great questions to get that positive, appreciative brain into action and get us out of fear, because the fear is what drives the mental health problems, because you're just panicking and full of toxins and you're just not thinking. So, you know, if all you do is start to think better and think more resourcefully and think about what next and have some great questions to shape that what next, you're on your way, really. And I know that might sound like a massive oversimplification, and it probably is, to be fair, but I think it's got to be the starting point. It's got to be the starting point. The last thing I'd say is seek support, because it is out there. And I think we are at a time where perhaps I'd like to think that people are their most empathetic and their most sympathetic, because we're all experiencing this together and we all recognise how difficult it's been. So actually I think the level of compassion and human compassion out there could be quite good at the moment and could be available to be tapped into. The Growth Hub website, they've asked me to put their website on here today because there's lots of resources and materials and signposting, I believe, on that website that you could maybe do a lot worse and have a look at. So who could you seek support from? If you can get a coach, free or paid, but preferably free, but if you can get a coach, get a coach. Get a coach, somebody who's going to sit with no judgment, doesn't have to be an expert in your life or your business, but can just help you tap into that strength and tap into those questions and help you to sort out your thinking and your next move. If you can get a coach or a mentor, I mean, that would be my number one recommendation, really. An honest friend, somebody who's going to empathize, but actually is going to help you shift. It's not just about somebody who's going to go, oh, here, isn't it awful? Yeah, let me tell you how rubbish my life is too. It's about somebody who's going to say, I hear what you're saying, so what now? What's the plan? What do you want to do? What would be a great first step? How can I help you, or how can others help you? There's financial advisors, business peers, there'll be government websites, and of course citizens advice. And lastly, but by no means least, if you need the help of a GP, go and see your GP. Sometimes when we get overheated and overstimulated by that reptilian brain, it can take its toll, you know, and it can feel difficult to get out of the quagmire. And sometimes, you know, it's the right thing to go and seek GP help, and even, you know, get some medication which might just calm down that reptilian brain and simmer down some of that adrenaline and cortisol, which will give you a chance to tap into that neocortex again. So there is absolutely no shame in going to see a GP at all. In fact, I would highly recommend it if that's what you need to do. So in summary then, so this has been a very quick whistle-stop tour of brains and stuff. You're being human. You know, it's been tough. And I know for some people it's also been a massive opportunity. You know, who knew that going into hand sanitizers was going to be the thing to do this year? But you're being human. Wherever you are, you're being human. You're not being weird. You're not being strange. You're not being odd. You're just being human. So well done. You're going through a grief process. And it's not just you, it's also the whole world. So you've got group think going on. So even if you're feeling marginally better, you spend 1 hour in the hairdressers and you're thinking you're back to square one again. Number 3, it's your brain's job to keep you alive, not to make you happy. It's your job to make you happy. So look at proactive ways that you can do that. And I've given you some pointers today. It's okay to not be okay. You know, if you need to seek the help, if you need the GP, if you need whoever you need, it's all right. It's all right. You know, it's weird times. It's all right. And actually, if you're not okay, the fact that you're saying, this is where I am and I'm going to get help for it, I'm going to do something about it, how brilliant are you? You know, just breathe, man. Just breathe. Don't believe everything you think and feel. Check in. No judgment, no fighting. Just check in and see where you're at. Ask and seek better questions. There are better questions out there than why am I so rubbish? Why am I such a failure? Why is it my business that's gone to the wall? Why am I so rubbish? There are better questions than these that you can be asking yourselves right now. Seriously. You know, what can I do about this situation? Who can I speak to? How have I dealt with adversity before and been utterly wonderful? What are my strengths? These are better questions. Small steps. Okay, small steps. One step at a time, one day at a time. Hairy, audacious goals. I love them. But let's maybe start to think about some of those shorter term goals which are achievable and attainable, because the more you get under your belt, guess what? The better you feel. So start to think about those goals, those outcomes, and take one step at a time. And finally, there is support out there. You're not on your own. There are lots of people who are willing to help. And, you know, we do have global compassion because we're all going through the same thing. So there is at least a bit of understanding out there at the moment, which isn't always the case. So in every adversity, every cloud has a silver lining, I guess. So that's all I wanted to say in my whistle-stop tour. So there is a little bit of time left for questions. So I don't know if there's been anything in the stream, Melissa, or if people are just going because they've had just so much information. But I'm really happy to take any questions if there are any.
Yeah, so firstly, just from me, that was fantastic. So I do think it's really helpful, especially the bit about the brain. I even did psychology at A-level. I don't even remember that, but it's really useful to know that and to actually understand the processes that we go through.
Yeah.
I've got a question here. So people can be going through it and be thinking they're on the mend and then drop down and keep going through the up and down phase. What would you suggest is like the motivation? Because that can be quite disheartening. So what would you suggest to keep pushing through this up and down phase?
Yeah, I think the thing to say is, you know, that when you hit the bottom of that curve, I would never advocate trying to not experience the bottom of the curve. You know, you can't bypass it. You have to kind of experience, you have to feel it. And because sometimes that depression bit, and it's an unfortunate word actually, the depression on the bottom of that curve, because I think it has certain connotations. But I think if you look at it as almost more like a recovery, so it's a place to just take a bit of time out and to just have a bit of a moan and a bit of a whine and go, why me? It's not fair. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's part of the process. It's just you don't want to stay there. You don't want to get stuck there. And you certainly need to be careful who you wallow with when you're there, because there are professional wallowers who will just keep you there the rest of your life if you're not careful. So there's something about recognizing that you do need to go into that dip for recovery and to take a bit of time out, but that it's temporary. So whether you keep going back into and out of it or not, I think my advice would be make a date with a mate, you know, somebody who is going to help you get out to that acceptance phase and to kind of keep pushing you forward, recognizing if you slip back again, it's all right, it's just part of it. But start to make a date with a mate who'll say, okay, I hear where you are, it's been rubbish, hasn't it? What now? What's the plan? What could you do? And somebody who's going to challenge you a little bit. It's not about going in and having a big pity party, because that, you know, that's not going to help in that situation. And I think at the moment the reason why we're all stuck there is because, dare I say it, we're on a massive pity party. Nationally, we're in a national pity party at the moment, and even if you're feeling all right, it's like I say, 10 minutes in the hairdressers and you're back in your pity party again. So I just be mindful of that's what's going on, and surround yourself with good people, you know, and the people who are the doom merchants and the naysayers and the woe betiders and the, oh, it's awful, it's not awful, it's a catastrophic, isn't it? Those people, just, I mean, avoid them like the plague right now. They're not going to help you.
Thank you. And just another question, just with regards to your services, do you actually go into, obviously not right now, but would you do virtual events with businesses, so their staff? Do a bit of coaching with those? Is that something?
Yeah, so I do virtual or live. I mean, I'm doing a live event today. I mean, that's what you see. I'm not actually in my home. I'm in a hotel, so I know it looks like I live in a stately home, and I should just pretend that I do.
You could have fooled us.
You know, people think, God, it's so palatial. She's so rich. She must be amazing. I'm in like a really super swanky hotel, hence the heavy curtains. But yeah, I'm doing a live event this afternoon. So I'm doing some MBTI stuff this afternoon. But yes, I do webinars and live events, and certainly I both coach and teach people how to coach as well.
Amazing.
There's lots of other things, leadership and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So if any of the attendees today would like to contact Katrina after the session, then please feel free to do so. I am happy as long as you are, Katrina.
Yeah, I do. I think that my website details might have been on there. So just check out my website. You'll get to meet my Scotty dogs and my Highland cow again. It'll be a delight for you. Yeah.
Thank you. So just from the Growth Hub, just want to say a massive thank you for delivering that such a thorough presentation for us. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's been lovely.
No, and I think some people might not even have realised how helpful it could have been. But when I think people like such as yourself bring up these issues, or maybe some troubles or worries that people are having in these thoughts, it actually makes people take a step back and think, oh, do you know what? That is my thought process sometimes.
And you know, I teach this stuff, and just because I teach this stuff, I still do it. You know, I'm not perfect. I still go into that survival thinking. You know, and when my diary emptied in March, I mean, I probably went through all 10 at the same multitask. I probably did all of them. You know, so you never, the thinking never stops. The only time the thinking stops is when you're dead, right? So the thinking never stops. You will always be pounded with thinking. It's just recognizing what thinking you're having and whether it's actually going to help you to stay in responsive, or it's going to fight or flight you. And if you're in a fire, have fight or flight, get the hell out. But if you're not, then, you know, just better questions, better thinking, different thinking. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Just on the last note, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Joe Gill. So he's a specialist HR advisor for the Growth Hub. So he'll give you a little brief overview of how he can help you.
Thanks, Melissa. Anyone watching from the start, I've had to put my coat on because it was a bit chilly. Didn't have time to run downstairs and put my heating on because I was too engaged in that, to be honest. So thanks very much to Catriona from myself as well. Now, I'm the HR advisor at the Growth Hub, so I go out and assist local SMEs and self-employed people with any HR or employment support. So as you can imagine, at the minute, it's very COVID based, so anything around the job support scheme, the self-employment scheme. If you're a business owner and you've got to make those difficult decisions of making people redundant, I can help you with that process as well. And also, what I used to do back in March was general everyday HR as well. So anything like contracts or policies or anything like that, you need any assistance, please get in contact with the Growth Hub and they'll point you in my direction. The assistance is fully funded, so there's no cost to the business. It's all funded by the EU, and we can help you out with any area of HR. It's been sort of my job to put this mental health series we've done together on the Growth Hub website. I'd like to thank Catriona again because I think this morning's been absolutely fantastic, and we'll hopefully have it loaded on the website soon within the next week or so. I think that brings our mental health series to a close for the time being as well, doesn't it, Melissa?
It does, until furlough ends, and then we have to go again with the redundancy and recruitment triage service.
Yeah, looking forward to that one as well. But all the webinars we've run throughout the series, obviously we've got this one on mental health. We've had Citizens Advice run one for us on personal finances. We had another company run one for us on suicide prevention, and also another one called Able Futures, which is a Department for Work and Pensions funded programme to assist any employees struggling with mental health issues as well. So please check out our website because there's plenty of information and resources on there as well. Like I say, if you need any support around anything HR, be it mental health, be it the COVID sort of support schemes, please get in touch with the Growth Hub and we can help you. And it's fully funded, so it's zero cost to you. All it'll cost you is an hour or so of your time to get the information you need. Thank you.
And I would say as well, for those of you who are looking at facing redundancy, either your own or making your staff redundancy, there is a way of doing redundancy well. You know, and whilst it can be a really grim and a scary thing to face, it doesn't have to be utterly awful. It can be done well, and with the right support, and again, those right outcomes and the right thinking and the right support, it can actually genuinely be a positive experience. So don't assume that redundancy, even though it might be not what you want to do, you can still do it well.
Brill, thank you. Just want to say again, thank you, Catriona, and thank you to all the participants today. I know it can be quite a tough webinar maybe to listen to, but I do think the awareness has been brilliant, and also it showcased what Catriona's work and what she can do. So if you need to get in touch with us as a coach, even if it's for your staff, I think that would be brilliant, or even if it's just a one-to-one for yourself, just to help you through this.
To raise awareness so that your staff understand how they're working as well. Even that can be useful, can't it?
Yeah, please do get in touch. But thank you everybody for joining, and thank you again to my fellow speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Take care.
No problem.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. See you soon.